right, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to an early, bleary-eyed day in Eastern Time Zone. It's so nice to have you back as we dive in with another exciting week here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I know you got some familiar faces in the crowd today, but if you are new to what we do, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world through over 40 live free monthly interactive broadcasts. And this month is particularly special because, as many of our students know, February is our entire month dedicated solely to incredible women in science, technology, engineering, and math. We are diving in strong. We've been to, I think, 5 countries already in the last week. We've got many more to come in the weeks to follow, and I'm so excited to have you back. Now, today, we start a series of incredible programs on whales in the next week with Gina Lonati. Her work has taken her to study sea urchins, manatees, and more of the most amazing animals in the sea, but today specifically, she's going to dive in on the use of drone technology to study whales from above. If there's a cooler use of drones, I don't know what it is, and I'm really excited to bring her in to introduce some of the amazing stuff she's done to track some of the most incredible creatures on this planet. So, without further ado, Gina, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. It's so nice to have a new person joining us. This is so exciting.
Yes, thank you so much to you and for Joe for inviting me. I'm really excited. I love talking about whales. So yeah, happy to be here.
You're in the right place. And if you want to dive in, bring up that screen, you're good to go. I'll say hi to our YouTube friends while you're pulling that up, and can't wait to dive in, literally and figuratively.
Yes, I know. I love all marine puns. All right. Good. So hopefully that's showing. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gina Lonati. I am a PhD student at the University of New Brunswick in St. John, Canada. And as a PhD student, I think I'm in my 21st year of school. So definitely love school. And if you want to follow in this path, you've got a lot of years ahead of you, but a lot of enjoyable years. So I'm here to talk to you specifically about studying the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale from 2 different perspectives. So we'll look at them from above and then look a little bit underneath the surface of the water at what they eat. So I'm excited to be here to talk to you about my PhD research. So what are North Atlantic right whales? They can live up to 70 years. I'll get into later why they seem to be only living to 35 years today. But they're very large animals. They can be about as long as a semi-truck. They can weigh as much as 8 elephants combined. And they also have 2 kind of cousin species, the North Pacific right whale and the southern whale, although these different species don't interact with each other. They're in different parts of the world. And right whales are baleen whales, meaning that they have plates of the same material that our fingernails and our hair is made out of, keratin, in their mouth. And they use these plates as they're swimming through the water to collect tiny plankton prey. And it acts like a spaghetti strainer. So the animal is able to catch lots of these prey during a dive. Where are they? They are primarily on the eastern coast of North America. So they range in the Atlantic Canada, so the northern part of their range during the warmer months where they're feeding, also found in New England area of the US. And then they'll venture down to the southeast United States, so off of Georgia and Florida, to breed and give birth to calves. Why are North Atlantic right whales endangered? Now, sadly, historically, they got their name, the right whale, because they were considered the right whale to hunt. They came very close to shore, and because they have lots of fatty blubber, they would float after they were harpooned. So it was very easy for whalers to collect these animals for their meat and for their blubber. We know that, or we think that the pre-whaling population was already pretty small, so about 2,000 individuals. But during whaling era, so between the late 18th and early 20th centuries, these whales were hunted nearly to extinction. So it was thought that there were actually at one point fewer than 100 North Atlantic right whales remaining. But what about today? The species sadly has barely recovered since whaling stopped in the 1930s. And especially since 2010, we've noticed a remarkable decline in the numbers again. And the population estimate as of 2021 was only 340 individual North Atlantic right whales. So what's happening to these whales? Why are they endangered? Well, in the words of a colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Moore, we are still whaling by accident. So even if we're not intentionally harvesting these animals for their blubber and their meat, we're still causing the deaths of these animals, perhaps indirectly. So it's estimated that 86% of the population has been entangled in fishing gear at some point in their lives, some up to 6 times on separate occasions. And between 2003 and 2018, we believe that 22 whales, at least 22 whales, died from entanglements in fishing gear. In addition, collisions with vessels are a huge impact on the species, both killing them directly and also causing severe injuries. And we estimate that 16 died between that same period. Finally, the trifecta, climate change has caused a decline in their plankton prey, specifically these rice grain-sized plankton called copepods that are the favorite food of right whales. So how do we study the whales? How do we know how many there are, where they are, and what they're doing? The challenges to studying whales are that they're fully aquatic. They don't come out on land like seals or other amphibious animals, so we can't get a close-up view very easily. Whales can hold their breath and dive very deeply. North Atlantic right whales can hold their breath for about 15 minutes. So once they're down, they could pop up kind of anywhere in the area. They also have very vast ranges, so it's hard for people to follow them and keep track of them over time. So we study whales from different observation platforms. North Atlantic right whales do come close to the coast, as I showed on the map, so people can study them from land using binoculars and sometimes the visual eye to make observations. We can also send people up in planes, and that gives us a much broader scale survey of whales. However, it's harder from a plane to track individual whales as they're coming and going from the surface. But we also do a lot of work from boats, so we can approach a little more closely in a boat. We can get some more detailed data, but it's hard to cover these large, vast ranges that whales are known to be distributed over. We also use various observation equipment. So whales make sounds. Different species often make different characteristic sounds. So we can listen for those sounds using underwater microphones called hydrophones. We can also put tags on whales that you can see this one has suction cups. And that gives us information about where the whales are, how deeply they're diving, how quickly they're diving. It can also sometimes have a hydrophone on it to listen for the whale sounds. But I will say it's difficult to tag North Atlantic right whales because they seem to be very slippery and they like to rub up on each other. So those tags often fall off. And then of course we use cameras to take photographs, binoculars to see them more closely. And more recently, we've been using drones. What is a drone? So a drone is a remotely piloted aircraft system, meaning that there's no little pilot in it. They're much smaller than planes, but often shaped like them. And you have someone controlling them with a remote controller. And they can carry various sensors, cameras, lots of different information for collecting data from the environment or of animals. But I always like to remind people that you need special permits to fly drones and to fly drones over wildlife. So you can't just pick up a drone from the store and start going and flying over these animals. You do need special permits. But there are kind of two types of drones. There are multi-rotor, meaning multiple propellers. So you have a quadcopter with 4 propellers, a hexacopter with 6, or you have a fixed wing drone, which looks very much like a plane. If you are on social media and you think drone technology is really cool, I suggest following the hashtag drones for good, because drones are being used to fight fires, rescue drowning victims, eventually delivering our packages, and inspecting hard to reach infrastructure. So very cool uses for drones in our world today. Now drones, as these photos show, give us a huge advantage for observing whales from above. So you can see in this photo, with the drone photo of the North Atlantic right whale tail, we can see the entanglement scars on this animal and a lot more detail than we can get from a boat photo. Can't really see those scars, can't make out who it is. Probably identify this individual whale based on these unique markings. So my research at the University of New Brunswick, St. John, we have a drone that I've nicknamed Maddie. She's a DJI Matrice, so that's where her nickname comes from. She has 2 cameras, a visible spectrum camera, meaning just regular color photography, and a thermal imaging camera. And we put little pool noodles on her just in case she goes overboard, but so far that hasn't happened, so great, that's great. And I've taken Maddie out into the field over the past 3 summers in both the Bay of Fundy and the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada. And I've flown her 118 times over both North Atlantic right whales and humpback whales. And this is what a drone launch looks like from our research boat. So we have someone who's hand catching and launching the drone because the boat can be kind of rocky and it can be dangerous to land the drone directly on the boat deck. I have a video here of us launching the drone.
Ready to launch! Ready? Launching!
So that's a nice smooth launch when everything goes well. And this is a type of image that we can get from the drone. This is a humpback whale in the Bay of Fundy in 2020. And what I do with these images is what's called photogrammetry. So because I know the altitude of the drone, how high it is, and I know the focal length or some specifics of the camera lens, I can obtain measurements of the length and the width of each whale to assess its body condition. So we can tell, is this whale skinnier or fatter than another whale? This is what it looks like from the thermal imaging camera. So we have the color image on the left and then the thermal image on the right with white being hot. And you can see how the blowholes show up as very hot. And so what I'm doing for my research is estimating the temperature of those blowholes to get the first measurements of internal body temperature of whales. We can't just stick a thermometer in a whale's mouth due to logistical and ethical constraints. So this is the best way we can do that without being really invasive. So here's a video just showing that all in action. So seeing those hot blowholes on the right and seeing the color image on the left. And it's sped up in between surfacings, but this is kind of what I get to look at after the field work and how I analyze all the data. So that's a humpback whale. So specifically, I'm curious if blowhole temperatures correspond with body condition, meaning can whales get fevers, or if a whale is skinny, is it colder? Is it experiencing hypothermia because it has less insulative blubber? We've had no way to estimate this. So it's really exciting work, and I'm really hopeful I can share some results with you all at a future date. Now I'm going to now dive in underwater at how we study whale prey. As I mentioned, climate change is changing the distribution, the quality, and the quantity of North Atlantic right whale prey called copepods. The challenges to studying these animals is that they live at depth, they're super small, they're in patches, so they might be here, but they're not over here, and so they're very hard to observe when we are on the boat. So what do? We deploy a bunch of different equipment. The first one, probably the most sense, means we tow nets behind the boat and basically collect plankton at different depths. And then we can look at them under the microscope, identify which species are there, and estimate how many are around. We can also deploy packages of equipment that have various underwater sensors that can measure how salty the water is, temperature of the water, how deep it is, and we have some specialized sensors that send sonar pulses, as well as use low-grade lasers to look for the tiny plankton underneath the equipment, so we can get estimates of how much plankton is there without having to collect them. And so the goals of this plankton sampling are to compare how much food is around to how many whales there are, as well as other environmental data so that we can predict where whales are most likely to be at certain times of the year. And this is important when we think about where there's fishing effort, where there's vessel traffic, so that we can reduce our impact in these important feeding habitats for North Atlantic right whales. So if you're curious how you can help, if you're really excited about this and want to go out and do something, I'd say the first thing is to learn some more. This is just a very brief overview of all the things that are being done for North Atlantic right whales, but you can sign up for the North Atlantic Right Whale Consortium quarterly newsletter, and they'll send you out information about which whales just gave birth to calves, if there have been any advances in the technology used to study whales. So it's a really great source of information. Whale Insight is a really cool website that will, it's a map, an interactive real-time map that will kind of tell you where whales have been seen by researchers, by the public, and people can call, like let DFO know if they think they see a right whale, and your sightings can show up on that map. And also, maybe some of you have seen this already, but Last of the Right Whales is a documentary that our lab at UNB was recently in, and it's been showing in some theaters. Right now, it's been adapted to Nature of Things and is on CBC Gem for free. So feel free on the app to go check out Last of the Right Whales. It's a really excellent documentary on all the research that's going into helping these whales. Besides CBC Gem, I believe in the US, Last of the Right Whales is coming to PBS sometime in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that as well. You can also go out and tell people if you're really sad about learning there's only 340 of these precious animals left. Go tell your friends, your family, tell local politicians that you care about these animals, because that's the best way we can make sure that we protect them. And if you're considering a career in marine biologist, I give you all the thumbs up. It is a fantastic way to make a difference. I did want to speak quickly about being a marine biologist, if that's something that some of you are interested in. I find that Google image search does a disservice to what a marine biologist is. When you search, it's just all photos of people underwater scuba diving. But in fact, marine biology is much more diverse than that. So we have biologists, we have chemists, we have physicists, politicians and policymakers, photographers, artists, statisticians, writers, teachers, people doing work in the field, people doing work in the lab, people at computers and offices, people in planes, boats, flying drones, recording data, building models, and so much more. So if scuba diving is not for you, it doesn't mean you can't be a marine biologist or contribute to marine biology. And so why did I choose marine biology? Again, it's an opportunity to make a difference doing something that I love. Every day is different. You get to see some really cool things. It uses lots of different aspects of my brain, which is really great. And ultimately, my goal is to become a professor because I love school and conduct my own research and mentor students of my own. So with that, I want to thank you again to Joe and Jesse for inviting me, for all of you for caring about whales. I've got my email address there, my website, social media. Feel free to follow me for more updates on my research. And really thank you all for your attention.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gina. By the way, other than my wife, you're the person who mentioned liking school the most I've ever run into. So thank you for that. I'm glad it's doing so well for you.
Yes.
If you want to come out of screen share, see us again, have a bit of a conversation. We're going to dive in with questions. We've got our groups on YouTube, Miss Ball's class live with us, and a couple that have been emailed to me in advance of the program. But I want to start with one of those last pictures of yours. You had a dolphin in a room. What's with the dolphin or porpoise or something?
Oh, that one, yes. So when I was living, before I moved to Canada to pursue my PhD, I was working in Florida for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And we would respond to live and dead stranded marine mammals along the coast. And that dolphin was a bottlenose dolphin that live stranded in shallow water. And we went out and got a stretcher and brought her into a big U-Haul truck and brought her to SeaWorld Orlando, where they were able to diagnose that she was really old. She had pneumonia, and they were able to nurse her back to health. And because she's so old and compromised, she's still in captivity, but it was a nice contribution to saving the animal. Yeah.
How about that? It's so funny. Florida seems to be a place. We do regular programs at the Turtle Hospital in Marathon, Florida. So they do the same thing. They rescue turtles, and when they're really, really sick, they end up keeping them so that people can they become an animal ambassador. But what a neat story.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to share one question from our group online first, and then I'll head to Miss Ball's grade 12s. So the temperature, you talked about taking the temperature. How do you assess that? So you've got this picture where okay, great, it shows up and you see that it's hotter than the rest of the whale, but how are you taking that temperature from that? Is there like a set temperature for color, or do tell?
Oh my gosh, that's my whole PhD essentially. Yeah,
Cool.
that's an excellent question. It turns out it's a lot. There is more complexity to it than just flying a camera and taking an image and getting a temperature. Each pixel in the image has a sensor intensity value. And I'm doing a bunch of calibrations that I didn't show you to try to identify if the pixel is this color white, it equals this degree Celsius temperature. And it differs whether it's windy, whether it's hot or cold, whether it's humid. So we're doing some of those calibrations to try to correspond the color pixel with how hot or cold it is. But it's a very complex question. So if you want to learn even more than that, feel free to email me and I can get into more detail.
I mean, say no more other than that's what my PhD is on. It's like, okay, this is a 5-year project to like figure out how do we get this. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Gina, we're going to head to Goderich, where I think the latest spy balloon was shot down right near, if I'm not mistaken. And we're going to head to Miss Ball's class at grade 12. So you guys have a question for us? Come on in and take us away. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Way to bring that up, Jesse.
Yeah. It's new on the news every day. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
So we have a controversial question. So Gina, you mentioned being involved with that rescue of the dolphin with SeaWorld. And we just wondered maybe what your opinion is on organizations like that, or maybe the pros and cons to more balanced approach to discussing those types of organizations.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a hot topic, I realize. And we worked very closely with a lot of the folks at SeaWorld Orlando, a lot of the veterinarians, a lot of the animal care technicians. And honestly, I haven't worked with more passionate people and more dedicated people. They do care a lot about the animals and they want what's best. The things we learn from animals in captivity can be hugely advantageous for protecting the animals in the wild. I remember I also interned at the New England Aquarium, and there was a fish that was attacked by another fish. And I remember they were going to do a surgery on it. And I was like, why would you do surgery on a fish like this big to save it? And they said, well, imagine that fish, there's only like a few left in the wild, and one of them shows up injured or sick. We want to be able to have practiced and know what we're doing with that fish to help save it. So I've always thought about that and the value that these animals can give us as scientists and conservationists. I will say, of course, we want to make them the most comfortable. We want to make sure they're enriched and living their best lives as well. In the US, I know there's the American Zoological Association that goes out and certifies certain aquaria, the conditions in those aquaria. And so I would definitely advise not supporting zoos or aquaria that are not accredited, because it is a very rigorous process. And we're constantly learning and adapting to taking the best care of these animals. So Yeah, again, I'm happy to go into more detail if you want to contact me personally, but those are
No, that's a fantastic answer. And I love when students ask this question. It's only students grade 9 and older that ever ask this. And I love whenever we get it. We do a lot of programs with zoos and aquaria. And I'm so happy you mentioned AZA. So in the US, it's AZA. In Canada, it's CAZA. Europe, there's an E, like so on and so forth. And basically, it means that they're at the highest standard of animal care. They're the sort of people that when one fish gets bitten by another fish, they do surgery on it. And you can, when we do programs with organizations that fit that bill, they're the most dedicated. They love animals like we love, I mean, like you love whales and like you love school. Like, I mean, they're the most passionate people in the world. People are like, okay, we'll handle people if we can, but animals are our lifeblood. And so so many of the people we bring on this program, conservationists, begin their life working or connecting with a zoo or aquaria that fits that bill. And so much good comes from it. It's a great question, and you can get 50 different answers on it, which I admire too. Great job, Ms. Paul's class. All right, one other question from online. Who else is doing this? You talk about sort of like, again, pretty state-of-the-art stuff. We're getting these pictures of whales. We're learning about them in this completely different way. Are you one of the only labs that's doing this? Do you get to collaborate and connect with other scientists around the world? Like, are you on the absolute cutting edge? What's going on, Gina?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a mix of both. As a PhD student, I wanted to try something that hasn't really been done, and that's getting these absolute temperature measurements from thermal cameras on drones. But I will say I was inspired by Dr. Michael Moore was flying drones with thermal cameras over right whales in Cape Cod Bay, Massachusetts, and kind of looking at the qualitative, some of the thermal signatures, like some whales have certain heat patterns, and looking at the thermal signatures in a less quantitative way. There was also a group, I think it was in Australia area, who found that humpback whales, their dorsal fin, the fin on their back, would pulse heat at about what we'd expect of a whale heart rate. So could we like measure heart rate of whales with thermal imaging in drones? That's really cool. I think we still need to increase our sample size, need to go out and observe some more whales. But yeah, I'm definitely not the first one to fly drones over marine mammals. Definitely not the first one to do photogrammetry. They used to do photogrammetry from planes, but they find the drone gives higher resolution imagery and more accurate measurements. So I've definitely borrowed ideas from lots of very intelligent, very creative people. And it's not just me doing this. I have a village of support. So I do have to thank a lot of people for these data.
This is one of the things in science that I love the most. And I mean, it's why it's so exciting to do a PhD, to finish up. Like, you get to work with so many different people that are so passionate and, maybe slightly different fields, maybe the same people. And you find someone that's as nerdy about whales as you are. That's a pretty exciting thing in life. That was great. Thank you for that. Online, another one. So when you go out on these journeys, you're going out, you're flying the drone a few times. How long are you on the boat? Is it just like a day trip? Is it a multi-week expedition? What's happening?
Yeah, great question. It varies. So when we do our work in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the whales are about 8 hours from shore sometimes. So we do stay out overnight as long as the weather is cooperative. So we'll usually go out in July and August. We'll set aside 2 weeks of time and then try to spend as many days at sea as the weather and fuel and food will allow, because we get really hungry on the boat. And then in the Bay of Fundy, we do day trips. So the whales aren't as far. There may be a 3-hour steam, so we can get 3 hour. We leave at like 4 a.m. sometimes, get out there for the sunrise, which is always beautiful, and like come back in as the sun's setting. But I did volunteer with NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, on a 24-day research cruise on the Pacific back in, I guess that was 2014. And so we were doing marine mammal surveys like 80 miles offshore, and we just stayed out there for 24 days. And that was, you're like, where am I? Who am I? What? But it was awesome. I've learned to manage seasickness. I find for those of you who are worried about marine biology that you get seasick, I've met very few marine biologists who don't get seasick. So you just kind of learn to manage it and
just get over it.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that you go out and you have this, like, you have a bunch of scientists, they're all being paid. We got the boat, we've got the drones, but it's like, man, we forgot snacks. Like, we're hungry on the boat.
Yeah.
There should be a logistics person behind that somewhere along the line.
Yeah, people like we request certain snacks, and if we don't have those snacks, like for me, it's goldfish. I have to have goldfish, or else I'm gonna be cranky out there.
There's a whole separate presentation in marine biologists wanting goldfish. I don't know. There's some psychology to unpack there. Chocolate is the favorite of scientists. I like. We're gonna head back to Miss Ball's class, grade 12. So if you guys have another one for us, come on back in. Hey.
Go ahead.
Do you find that the noise that the drones make interfere with your research at all?
Interesting.
That's a great question. Yeah. So Maddie, our drone, is probably on the larger side of drones that's been flown over whales. And there have been some experiments looking, they put the hydrophones under the water and then we'll fly drones at different altitudes and measure how much sound you can hear from the drone. And those results show that the smaller drones are like barely audible to whales, probably kind of like a fly buzzing in their ear. Our drone, we fly a little higher to alleviate some of the sound underwater. We have seen what, some whales will kind of roll or they'll dive to avoid, but I will say compared to close approaches with boats, the noise is significantly less. So we're reducing our impact on the whales, and it's probably only very temporary that the whales are like, oh, what's that? And they just kind of swim off. But yeah, that's a great question. It's something we were concerned about when we started this.
I'm glad. Well, you mentioned the ethics of doing some of this research, which is really interesting to hear people say that at all. Like when you have biological research, especially with a creature that's as intelligent, as charismatic as something like a whale, it's a really important consideration. So I'm glad that that's thought about. Yeah. Again, I highlighted at the beginning, you've done sea urchin stuff. We talked about the dolphins briefly in the program. We've got whales. Is there a species or a place or both that you're particularly keen to work on in the future? I mean, this is pretty cool stuff, so you might want to stick with this for some very long period of time, but is there anything that really dream goal of yours?
Well, I'd love to stick it through with right whales to see them start to recover. But besides right whales, I've always been fascinated by beaked whales. And these whales are, we have another beaked whale fan, a beaked whale geek. Yeah. These whales they're built with the same organs. They've got lungs. They don't have gills, but they can dive for over an hour and a half on one breath hold. They dive miles deep. And I think of them more as surfacers than divers because they spend their majority like in the dark, immense pressure, and just can live like that. And we know so little about them. People are starting to put tags on them and explore, like we're learning so much about what they're capable of. And yes, there's the Cuvier's beaked whale, which has been tagged a bunch. And yeah, these animals, there's one called the strap-toothed beaked whale where the males, their teeth literally grow up and around their upper jaw. And I think it's something like natural selection, like female strap-toothed beaked whales find that attractive. And yeah, you're like, how does it eat? And we just, all we know are like a few skulls are the ones that strand occasionally. And yeah, so those are really fascinating to me.
Well, this is something that's exciting too, and I always like highlighting this whenever we talk about whales, is that when people think about whales, oh, whale watching tours, we go offshore, you can see them from their blowholes, and like there are some whales that are like that. There are whales that we know almost nothing about. Beaked whales are like the latter category. I mean, we know so little on this planet about them. We occasionally catch them in nets we don't mean to, but we've almost even never heard of beaked whales in our programs, in like 100+ whale programs ever. Blue whales, I think we still don't know where they breed, if I'm not mistaken, or we just recently found that out. Like the oceans are big. I mean, it's astonishingly, it's such a large habitat, and there's so much to explore, and we've relatively done so little. So when you get stories like beaked whales, it's very exciting. Where would you even? Is there like a hot spot for that if you were to go? Is it Japan? Is it?
I mean, I think, we did see a couple beaked whales out on our Pacific research cruise, which someone's like, that's one over there. I was like, yes, saw a beaked whale. It's like just like a very distant blow. But I think they also do some work in the Caribbean area. I think there are some beaked whales there. I mean, yeah, it's hard to find them. They're all over, yet underwater somewhere. Yeah.
Cool. There you go. A mystery adventure to come. Gina, time flies and you're having fun in these programs. So I'm going to take just one more question. I'll head back to Miss Ball's class live with us, and then we'll wrap up from there. So come on back into Goderich.
Sure.
Anyone have one?
Mm.
Oh, do you only study whales in Canada?
Ooh.
Good question. Yep. So because the North Atlantic right whales, they don't know boundaries. They go between the US and Canada. I have been to Cape Cod Bay. Last spring, I did some drone work in Cape Cod Bay over right whales. And what's cool there is that they feed the copepod plankton are very close to the surface. So they'll just skim feed at the very surface, and it's really easy to get drone imagery when the weather cooperates. In Cape Cod Bay versus in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, they dive for 15 minutes and then they'll pop up over here and you're just buzzing the drone around, hoping the battery will stay high enough for you to get each surfacing. The battery lasts, usually can get 20 minutes. So you can kind of get the first surfacing and then the second surfacing and then you gotta come back. But we have 7 sets of batteries, so we can go cycle through.
I was gonna say, that seems like a really short drone like battery length. Is it because it's so powerful, or is it because what's the?
So we play it safe. A lot of drones now, like the DJI drones that we fly, are marketed for about 40 minutes, but we like to land with it, like we bring it back to the boat when there's 40% battery, because we don't want it to die while it's over the water. And sometimes bringing it in and catching it can take several approaches if there's wind or swell. So we play it safe. We try to get it back on the boat with at least a quarter of the battery left. But yeah, I think that's right now the limitation of drone technology is battery. I mean, when I get the drone up there and I'm over a whale, I just want that moment to last forever. It's the coolest thing to see it on the remote controller. But you always know in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm gonna have to land this eventually. So yeah, I think they're working on better technology. The thing is, the more battery capacity, the bigger the battery, the heavier it is, the less, like the bigger the drone needs to be. So
Always a trade-off.
Miniaturize the technology, I think.
I wish that next time we do a presentation with you, we need a footage of someone catching one as opposed to letting it go, but it seems so much lower stakes. You know, oh, there it goes, as opposed to luring blades on a moving ship. You know?
Yeah. Well, Natasha and Cody are my lab mates who are very trusting. They have all their fingers and arms still, but they wear protective gloves, like cut-resistant gloves, sleeves, a helmet, glasses. So we try to be very safe, but it does take a lot of practice.
See, at the end of your presentation, you were like, there are other jobs in marine biology. There's like office stuff. You didn't mention the cut-resistant gloves and glasses because of the blade. Yeah,
very attractive.
Gina, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing your like over-the-top enthusiasm for whales and the work that you do. I love it. I do want to encourage our classes, if you want to check out the Davies Lab, some of the stuff they're doing at UNB, please do. CBC Gem, Cody, who she's mentioned a couple times, mentioned this as well. So the nature of things, season 62. Season 62. Episode 1. Geez, that's how they've been going. Good job, David Suzuki. And then Gina's website, if you want to check out more of her work, we can get all this to you in an email as well. So please do follow up. Gina, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. I'll bring in Miss Ball's class to say farewell as well. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, everybody.